Thank you so much, Business World, for organizing this panel, and welcome panelists. We have a very interesting set of panelists which spans associations to large companies to innovative companies to also international organizations. I'm looking forward to a very rich conversation with diverse perspectives. The topic also is on innovation in recycling, which is one of the most important components in this industry, because in India, the informal sector and a lot of other aspects makes the case of recycling waste in India very different and special from a lot of different parts of the world. And therefore, innovation in this sector has some very interesting and unique aspects to it, which I hope to bring out in this session. So without any further ado, welcome everybody, all the panelists, and let's dig into the first part of our discussion, which is about what is the status quo right now in India? What kind of innovations are we looking at in the recycling sector? If you were to just point out maybe top two types of innovations in the process, then what would that be? And I would like to invite Mr. Sampath. You are running a company for the last 17 years, well established. What do you see?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for giving this opportunity to be you all. Yes, as you rightly said, we are in the recycling industry for more than 20 years, and we are the one who started the PET recycling in this country way back in 1998.
Yes.
We have been, try to push the innovation into the recycling from the day one. And one of the thing we have done is that, to bring in the quality recycling equipment from the Europe. And we have done, with our own engineering knowledge, we have done the washing lines for the PET bottle recycling way back in 98. And it is slowly picked up. And we went even up to bottle grade way back in 2005. And so we were always trying to improve the technology, which can be sustainable and which can also be affordable by the Indian market. So that's how we have done that. Then we also jumped into recycling of deep.
If I may just intervene, in general, in India, in the recycling industry, what are the areas that you find where there is innovation happening? So if you could throw some light on that, that would be very useful.
Actually speaking, the R&D on recycling is still on the paper. You go to any institute like IITs or IIPs or packaging institute, they're all talking on so many theoretical things. But for the recyclables, a lot of recycling R&D is going on, because there is a recyclability market is available, so that they keep improving upon. That's how I started the PET, because PET, they were doing a lot of innovation to add the values. But when you talk about the non-recyclable plastic, which is going to the dump site or the water bodies, which amounting to more than 4 million tons a year, is a big challenge for us. I don't think any major R&D is going on anywhere in a major way. But we, as a company, we have launched the pyrolysis in 2009, and we never stuck to one pyrolysis for one single material like polypropylene or polyethylene. So every year we have been launching technology, the same pyrolysis technology with a different catalyst and different heating method to address the non-recyclables. For example, the FRP from the windmills.
I'm just going to go quickly. We just have 30 minutes, but thank you so much. I'll bring in again another private sector player, Nikhil. Your company is doing something very innovative as well, and you're capturing carbon and converting into usable products. So from your perspective, and not about your company, but then in general, where do you see the innovation happening in the recycling industry? Which part of the process?
Well, I may take a step back and say that, before recycling, we also need to focus on how things are made in the first place itself. If you get the manufacturing right, recycling becomes so much easier. Half of the times you cannot recycle things because they are mixed in a way that, for example, if you have a very good recyclable fabric, but the print on that is not, then separating the print at the time of recycling becomes a challenge. So now you need innovation to separate the print from the fabric. But you see, what we have seen in India, we often feel that there is not innovation happening, but we see how when the farm waste issue and the farm fires became an issue in India, how innovators came about saying how we can convert that into, feedstock, in terms of, we can convert into construction materials. So I see a lot of innovation happening in terms of fabric. There are a lot of startups. We were part of Fashion for Good Accelerator recently. There were a lot of, Indian members and cohort who are doing some interesting work of how we can make wonderful instant paints, how we can make different types of fabrics which are mostly using recycled, non-virgin material. All of that happening, and we love that. We are not doing that. We are recycling that. We are not doing that. I'm hearing my own voice. So we are primarily upcycling. We are primarily
because there's some echo.
We are pretty much an upcycling company. We believe that materials can be made in a different way, but they're made in a way that they can be upcycled or recycled later on in a much better way. So when we talk about, Mr. Sampath was talking about PET, how can PET be made by not using petrochems in the first place itself is a wonderful way of solving global warming.
Thank you, Nikhil. Where I think what we're getting at is the difficulty of segregation, which across the chain, right? Like you're talking about even the manufacturing of products, and Mr. Sampath is also talking about then after that recycling. And segregation of various materials also ups the cost of recycling. And in a country like India, the costs are the big burden in recycling. So let me just narrow down this discussion again and bring in Mr. Parlikar. On segregation, I know a couple of very innovative startups who are working on segregation and how to minimize the costs over there and make it more efficient. But would be great to hear from you if this hypothesis is somewhat correct or off the mark, that maybe in segregation that's where the innovation is happening or not.
No, certainly a lot of innovation is happening in terms of segregation of the materials. I have seen, for example, even robotic, interventions for segregating the materials, right? I mean, we are aware that color-based, density-based, then the nature-based or the chemical-based, segregation. But this is something which I found very interesting, which is happening, where robotics are getting involved. And certainly, I fully agree with Mr. Kaushik. Unless the segregation is properly done, the recycling becomes a very challenging task. And Miniya, you asked about the two innovations, which are really taking shape. I think, let me tell you in a general way, everybody is now looking at his non-recyclable material as a material to get converted into a recyclable material. In fact, every industry, is trying to look at it. And that's where the concept of industrial symbiosis is going to play a very major role, I believe, and a lot of work is happening in that respect also, as to how we can put, two entities, interested entities together to build a bridge and do something so that, like technology development by Graviky or by Sampath and by others, where you are trying to see how I can convert that material into a recyclable, a useful material. The color that you are talking about, Mr. Nikhil, is of course a cause of concern, but certainly a technology can always come in and do something. When does it happen? When an application is visualized. Absolutely. So I think that is the most important aspect in the whole process. You need to really visualize the application, and then you see, okay, this is something which is really going to come in and cause a problem to me. So how do I deal with it? And that's where I think a lot of innovations are possible. A lot of innovations are happening. And another very interesting observation in terms of non-recyclable getting recyclable is the MLPs. I'm seeing quite a few applications which are coming up now. MLP was supposed to be useless material, some going into the dump yards only, but quite a few applications I'm seeing where they are getting converted into different kinds of products. So I think innovation is the buzzword, which is going to really drive the recycling processes across the board.
Thank you. Thank you. So what I'm hearing you say is that from waste to wealth is catching on quite a bit. And you mentioned industrial symbiosis. There's a research center that I've founded, and they just completed a whole report on industrial symbiosis in India. And the way it is done in India is actually quite different from how it is done in the rest of the world. It's super interesting. There's, it's more of co-processing of waste, common co-processing units of waste, which is very different, from how it is. And I'd like to bring in Apoorva here. Apoorva, hi. I know that you're interested in looking at the bigger picture, and that is something which Mr. Parlikar also mentioned, of looking at the different paths of recycling. And if you could maybe talk about that, as well as look at that how internationally some of the practices in recycling, how does that compare to some of the innovations which are happening in India?
Absolutely. Thank you, Miniya. And I'd just like to bring a little bit of focus on an instance. Basically, many years ago, I was reading an article about whether electric cars are truly cleaner than conventional vehicles. And at that point in my head, I was like, the answer is pretty obvious. Electric vehicles basically don't use fossil fuels. So emissions are definitely bound to be lower. And it was pretty obvious, right? So I was like, what a waste of an article. And in fact, it was this curiosity that actually made me glance through this article. And I realized I was blissfully ignorant to so many different aspects of this process of a component itself. And I think the idea of what successful recycling means has definitely evolved significantly in recent years. So earlier, of course, the attention was focused on weight and volume, and stakeholders, whether it's companies, cities, governments, and academia, they've turned their attention to the environmental benefits of recycling waste streams through a life cycle approach to reassessing recycling. So now coming back to my story that I just spoke about, the article basically opened my eyes to this very same approach. I think the comparison of electric and conventional vehicles was not simply about how much they emit, but rather about the basis of the environmental impacts of raw material production, the manufacturing, transportation, operation, and finally decommissioning, basically the entire life cycle. So even when we talk about something like recycling, I think it's very important to look at it from a holistic approach, like look at it from sort of like a cradle to grave perspective. And that's why I think it's important to understand what, the whole life cycle approach actually means, and thinking of it as a concept and understanding that it's important to think like this when it comes to recycling, and think about it from a broader perspective. And of course, research and development is something that we need to definitely look at. And there's a lot of innovation in this aspect, especially in terms of life cycle management. And from UNEP point of view, this is something that we have been looking at so much in the past few years, especially when it comes to dealing with waste. There are so many different examples from an international point of view, whether it's reprocessing waste into energy, equipping smart bins with sensors. There's so many different, I think, innovative methods right now. And it's very interesting to see things from an Indian perspective, which is also very new to me. So it's a very interesting conversation right now that's unfolding.
Thanks so much, Apoorva. And what you just said kind of throws that flow that I had for this conversation completely, because what you just raised is the need to actually research a product's life cycle, right? So LCAs, as we call it, life cycle assessments, you're absolutely right. In India, it's very rare. We do a lot of life cycle assessment studies for companies, but frankly, that's a fraction in the ocean. And it's so important to scientifically assess. And I'm bound by contract to not take names of companies, but there are companies who openly, publicly say that, we are zero waste and, we're green. But when you actually do that LCA, you see that they are not. And somewhere in the production process, there is a lot of waste which is being produced, which they're not capturing. So, and the costs for doing, I wanted to get into costs because it's very important for India, the costs of recycling, and the cost for doing an LCA is inflated. How is a company going to do an LCA study? It's 12 lakhs, 15 lakhs for a research study. It doesn't cost that much. And even the softwares to do that, SEMA Pro and all these, super expensive to actually buy. So I think cost is a really important aspect in this. Nikhil, when you started your company doing something very innovative, you would obviously have put in a lot of R&D into this. Who bears the cost of that R&D which goes into that, and then the added costs of maybe doing it scientifically, like what Apoorva was saying, do an LCA, get the data. When you're saying one is green, then actually looking at the life cycle and looking at the data. So who bears the costs of that?
Well, I think these two things have to be linked to what Mr. Ulhas and Parlikar talked about. That is, how do you do industrial symbiosis? So, for example, you're right. Databases for LCAs are very costly. Some of them are not even available for Indian context. For example, if I want the energy, the cost footprint of the energy, CO2 footprint of energy is often not available if I want the Indian numbers for that. So I have to take comparables from Europe, which are often not the right comparables for me, and that could really screw up my technology, my workings later on. But here is the fact that, for example, we were part of Fashion for Good. They made a software available to us free of cost to do some of those calculations. So I think it is about the collaborations and getting out there, reaching out to the right sort of people to get a lot of that help, because you cannot be paying those costs upfront in real money. That way, forget the cost of what is the actual cost of your innovation. The development cost itself will not take place, and you would not have something out there in the market. So yes, there's always this challenge that who pays for it. What we have seen is, if you go through collaboration route, it is often possible that cost will be shared. So whenever we launch something, we do it through a collaboration. Right now, we're doing a collaboration with Diageo, where we are changing how they print on the bottles that they take out to the market, and how we made sure that doesn't affect the recyclability of the bottle itself, but all of that cost is being shared. So I think the way forward is to not do something in your purely in a research mode. Just do it in a more of a market development mode, where there is different stakeholders taking care of the cost. And once you have that sort of cohorts, accelerators, big companies backing you up, some of these costs of LCAs really start looking very small compared to what the overall mission is. So I think that's the way we have done till now. We are a bootstrap team. We haven't raised any external capital, but we have done some very interesting collaborations all over the world, primarily through this route, keeping very light in terms of the R&D goes from our pocket as such.
Thank you. That's very interesting, and I hopefully that should help other companies who want to get into doing innovative things and look for collaborations. This can get into another whole discussion about what specific how those collaborations were structured. I won't get into that, but I would like to ask Mr. Sampath, because you've been, of course, doing this for so long. And are there any specific ways, Mr. Sampath, that you see around you in other companies or in your own, where you've managed to keep the costs low, or at least have costs equivalent to the market rate, while continuing with innovation and R&D?
Yeah. In that, we have been, as we have been including the R&D cost in the cost of the product itself. And the innovation is that you make a technology which can be adopted for any kind of a plastic which is not being recycled, whether it is epoxy board from the e-waste, or whether it is FRP from the windmill, whether it is landfill based, whether it is waste collected from the water bodies, or foams, polyurethane foam, which nobody is recycling them. So we have a technology called this pyrolysis, where we are adopting, the developed technology in the same reactor can process any kind of a material. So then the R&D cost comes down, and even if you distribute the cost, it is not really pinching the user or the buyer. Let's put that way. So that's how we have done that, and our R&D is mainly on our own experiments. There is no data available to do so many things.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think data is a real problem, because you're talking about the databases. It's not just India, Nikhil. EcoInvent, one of the best databases, they don't have data for even the US as well. It's a real problem, So thank you for raising that. I'm going to continue on this aspect of how do you collaborate. to increase innovation in this field. And Mr. Parlikar, have you seen any innovative PPP models, partnerships maybe with the government, certain schemes, and bringing in the private sector, public-private sector, or university collaborations, which have helped in innovative solutions and or incentivized people to do innovations in this field?
Oh, sure. There are variety of collaborations, are required in terms of bringing innovations into the marketplace. I don't think one single approach really works. And all the stakeholders that you talked about, whether it is the government, whether it is the public private companies, whether it is the society as such, everybody needs to get into in one way or other. And there are, different models that I have come across. For example, while we were establishing the concept of co-processing of waste into cement kilns as fuels and raw materials, at that time, every trial that we had to demonstrate used to cost something like 10 to 15 lakh rupees, and it's a substantial cost. However, when we started discussing, saying that in fact it used to cost much more, almost about 60-70 lakh rupees earlier. So then, we involved a lot of stakeholders together to say whether the methodology which is being designed to evaluate the utilization, is it right? Can we do some optimization there? And then we did a lot of elaboration, evaluations of that, and then put it to the government. Government also accepted that. Then it said, okay, we can bring it down, the 7-day period, a 21-day period to something like 5-day period. That happened. Then that was a collaboration that I'm talking about. Then we had the collaboration in terms of this 10 lakh sharing. So can we, industry share, the industry who is going to gain in the process, the industry who is going to do the trial in the process, can they, share in some way? So, it was once the intent is there, I think the solutions start coming out. And when the innovation is seen to be a marketplace phenomena, I think solutions certainly come about. Whether it is this thing about the LC also, there were many initiatives which were taken up by the institutions. NITI I know for sure, IIT Delhi I know for sure. Where they said that they will evaluate and see, how this particular thing works out in a better way. So I think most important aspect in this situation is to sensitize, the requirements. Then I find there are many stakeholders who start coming together to contribute in even associations. Now the association that I am representing, MRAI, if it comes to that, there's something that needs to be done towards, promoting recycling and innovation is essential. The association will also come forward, and I've seen many associations coming forward in trying to propose. It's not just contributing rupees, right? But there's a lot that needs to be contributed in the whole process. And that is where I think, the stakeholder collaboration, stakeholder consultations, etc., will certainly help. And there are many innovative technologies which have come about, and in the commercial zone now. And co-processing is something which I know for sure, because I've been associated with it. Large amount of waste, plastics, etc., which did not have a solution at all. It started industrial hazardous waste, of course, as fuels and raw materials, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think another major point which is coming out of this discussion is co-processing, because I've seen this even in industrial symbiosis. Our Indian version of industrial symbiosis is actually co-processing units, which is very different from, let's say, in Germany, where the waste of one production unit is used as input for others. And that also solves a little bit the problem of the capacity problem, because making a smaller recycling waste recycling unit is very expensive. But then if you have a larger recycling unit for any kind of waste, and then you can manage to get waste collectively, and then so then it just comes out to be economical. So that's a great point about doing more of these co-processing kind of units. The second thing that I'm hearing here is that for collaborations, which helps in costs, it also in some way moves in the direction of symbiosis and helping each other. There is this information lag, because I know of, for example, a company that had plastic waste, and they did not know that the company, which was literally half a kilometer away, needed it, and they were selling their waste 50 kilometers away to an ice cream, whatever factory. So, so there's this lack of information of different stakeholders, and would love to hear from you, Apoorva, about UNEP and how organizations like UNEP or maybe other organizations that you know of can be effective platforms for information sharing or bringing together stakeholders. What's happening there, and how can this be made more efficient? Because clearly there is a lag in communication and information sharing here.
I think that's a very vital point that you just brought up, this lack of information in the public domain. It's definitely something that from an international organization point of view, we have recognized that, especially during the COVID period, that there is so much misinformation as well that's in the public domain about all these different topics. And one of the projects that we undertook, I work for the Disasters and Conflicts branch, and waste management is one of the key components, especially from the point of view of COVID. We did a lot of capacity building workshops for government organizations across the world, and we tried to unearth, okay, what are these missing gaps when it comes to governments across the world? What are the problems that they're facing? And what we're eventually trying to do is to be the knowledge bank and disseminate correct information through our portal, through various collaborations that we have with donors, with different countries. And this is something that we have actively been working on this past 1 year. And this is a little off topic, but since we're in the topic of collaborations, one thing I definitely like to focus on, which I think a lot of you did touch upon, is innovation by collaborating with students in different universities across the world. And I know of one of the key programs that I have actually witnessed, and so much innovation has come out of it, was the Enactus program that's there in so many different universities in India and across the world. And I think last 2 months ago, I was invited to one of these events, Enactus, conducted by Delhi University. And the kind of ideas that students came up with when it comes to solving, these complex issues was very fascinating to see. And I know that UN has one of these programs called the Green Nudge program, and so many different, collaborative programs that we have in universities. I think companies should really reach out and try to understand that students have a lot to contribute to when it comes to solving solutions, finding solutions to these problems.
That's fantastic, Apoorva. I so agree with you, because unless you involve universities and students, I'm very invested in education in India in the subject, because where will you get the generation who has the skills? And they are the future consumers as well. They are the future public, consumers and regulators or employees of companies. So important. Yeah? So thank you so much for that. And we just have 2 minutes left, and it's been such a fabulous discussion, which I was just, as you were saying, I was also summarizing as well, that we've seen that there is innovation in this space. Of course, lots to be done, but then I think segregation of waste, that's where we're seeing innovation, and that's where we need more of innovation, because that's the most cost heavy. And I would also like to add, there is a lot of human burden also there. It's menial work of segregating. So, and the use of robotics is useful there, and which comes to cost, because robotics, as we know, also that has costs. And then so collaborations to bring down the costs is one way to do it. There is, we talked about co-processing units in various ways, and I think co-processing units somewhere, that's the Indian way of scaling up recycling. We are seeing that in industrial symbiosis. We're seeing it in so many other ways as well. And finally, the lack of information, which is more of a hindrance. So we need to, do more in terms of getting stakeholders to talk to each other and know who's doing what, some common system maybe to say that, okay, these are the different actors, these are the people, and, so that they can reach out. My last question to all of you, to the entire panel, is that the people listening into this panel, the common people, what is it that they can do to spur innovation? We talk about the private sector, the government, but what is it that people can do to spur innovation in this field? And Apoorva, I'll start with you again, because you've made not a career switch, but parallel careers in the arts and dramatics, or films, if I may be precise, as well as environment, which is so powerful, because we probably need more people like you who are somewhere on the bridge and are able to communicate more to the public. But I won't put words into your mouth, but from the panel, if I can get some bites about what is it that people can do to spur innovation. Apoorva.
I think it's important to know and understand that being environmentally conscious does not mean doing big things. It just means starting very small, doing very small things, or reading up on simple ideas. And because most often what we do is we use the term sustainability and throw it around very loosely to anything and everything.
Yes.
So it's important for us to understand that waste management starts at one's home. And simple things start small today, and that's of course going to add on to create actually bigger changes for tomorrow. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Apoorva. Mr. Sampath, how can people, the ordinary person, how can they spur innovation in this industry?
So I think the most important thing that everybody who's listening to this particular deliberation is that, whenever they see something which does not have an application, perhaps they get an idea, yes, this can be used in some application, right? So maybe, there should be a forum where, this can be flagged. That, well, this is something that I saw as a stream which can be converted or utilized in this particular manner in this application.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be many people who will start looking at the opportunity to innovate, to convert that particular, conversion from a non-acceptable, a waste material into a product material, which will have a market tomorrow. So I think that is what everybody can do.
Then coming it to information, and a platform to exchange that information for waste to wealth. Thank you. Nikhil, just two sentences, what is it? Yes.
So I think we have to stop thinking of us as individuals, and there is some other people who are doing sustainability. I'm a chartered accountant. Okay, I used to do tax and international regulation, FEMA things. I moved to working on carbon emissions. So I think we have to see in coming years, every profession, every job has to have a sustainability as a core part of it. It won't be, hey, you just know numbers or be a bank. You have to see how banking can be more sustainable. So I think all of us have to stop treating ourselves as we are the layman and somebody else's problem is to solve these issues. We all are going to be we are going to be the affected people. So it's better just, I think just, get up and say that, okay, we got to learn more and we don't have to feel that we can't do anything. We have to wait for governments or somebody else to solve the problem.